folks, and a warm welcome back to Property Portfolio Building. This is our HMO Mini Series. This is episode 3, where we're going to be talking about finance, the game of two halves. We've already published location. That's episode 2, and space, lights, and rights as episode 1. So if you haven't seen those, go check those out. So without further ado, let's talk about it. Finance, a game of two halves. Why we call it a game of two halves is because there are two elements to working in a HMO development. First is how you're going to fund the development. The second is how you're going to exit. There are several ways to do both of these things. For example, upfront, you can buy with cash. Upfront, you can buy with part cash, part bridge. Upfront, you can buy with private investor funds. And at the back end, you can sell or you can refinance. What we're going to talk about in this 5 to 6 minute episode is specifically using bridging funds and refinancing onto a mortgage as a game of two halves. Now, property is a game, and you have to play the game. The first part of the game is when you're entering into doing a HMO, you need to understand how you're going to fund development, first and foremost, because if you haven't got the money to do the works, or you don't know what the end value is going to be, and you start the program, then you're going to run into some financial difficulties along the way. So the first thing to do is understand how you're going to fund it. So we are going to talk today about using a bridging loan. Okay. Bridging loan is a short-term loan. It's something that you can get through a broker or direct from a lender, and they, as long as they are happy to lend to the development of a HMO. Now, all finances are different. Some will lend to development of HMO, some won't. Some will lend development funds, some won't. So it's about finding the right lender for you at the right time, and I would highly recommend using a really, really good property broker to do that. And if you want recommendations, obviously, please go. In terms of why it's a game, it's because you need to, at the front end, be able to predict at the back end what your end value is going to be. So the reason for that is this. Your finance cost is going to be anywhere between 13 and 15% roughly, circa, and that's not advice, that's just circa, of your total cost of the development. So when you add up your values, so what you buy it for, the legals, the design work, and all that kind of stuff that you have to do to get the HMO in place, then the build costs, which might be financed through a bridge, and the cost of borrowing that, and then refinancing the program, you then need to know how much money you're going to leave in and whether or not that suits your strategy, because that's what it's all about. How much money you're going to leave in at the end and how much cash flow you're going to get after all costs are deducted, such as the mortgage cost, which leaves you with or the gas and electric cost, which leaves you then with your cash flow. So if you're going to use a bridge, typically, and this is typically, again, not advice, please speak to a broker, typically we get anywhere between 65% and 70% of the total GDV of the end value of a property to play with from a bridging loan. So 65%. Now it might be a 70% loan that we actually apply for, but the reality is after fees and retained interests, we actually get net around 65. So that's what we actually have to do. So if my value that I need to pay for is more than 65% for the purchase, the works, the designs, and all that kind of stuff, then I'm going to have to put more money in. I'm going to have to put that money in myself. So not only am I going to have to fund the deposit, but I'm going to have to find extra funds to do the works. So the first thing to play the game is understand the rules. You have to understand the rules of the game. The second thing is your GDV doesn't matter. What you think that property will be worth at the end doesn't matter. What matters is that you can prove it. So when you can actually sit down with a surveyor, or you can get a surveyor come to your property to say, right, this is why we are going for a GDV of this, you can prove through research and through models, whether it's an AST if you're going for a commercial yield, or local bricks and mortar values for other HMOs or other properties of similar size, that you can put them in front of the surveyor and help them with their decision. Because what will happen is the bridging surveyor loan will want an independent risk surveyor to come out and look at the GDV for the property. To be clear, our GDVs at the front end of the game versus the back end of the game are anywhere between 10 and 20% lower at the front end, because there's obviously, you can't prove it as much. You don't see the finish, you don't see the workmanship, you don't have it's not tenanted. So the first part of the game is to get as much evidence as you can to sit down with the surveyor and say, look, these are our other properties, or other properties managed by our agent, or other properties managed by people that we know in the area, and these are the rents that they're getting, and this is the standard of finish that we're going for. These are the equivalent rents. Now, there's two things you're looking for with a HMO. You're either going for a commercial yield-based assessment, or you're going for a residential bricks and mortar, or you're going for a hybrid of those two things. Now, we traditionally, in the areas that we go, look for the commercial uplift. So we go for a commercial yield. And in some areas, the commercial yields can be as low as 10%. And in some areas, the commercial yields for HMOs can be as high as 13%, 14%, in fact, on one of ours. So without knowing that information, how do we know what the end value is going to be? Because the difference between a 10 and a 14% yield can be anywhere between 60 and £200,000, depending on the end value of the property. So it's really, really important that you understand the GDV of your property, what 65% of that looks like, and if your purchase price is really, really low, you need to understand that you might not even get 65%. So if you bought below market value, you might not get the full development funds because they will only lend 65% if there's some security on the property. So if you bought like a property at 50 grand, it's going to be worth 400. There's no way you're getting 65% of the. I don't know what you will get. I would speak to a broker as early as possible. Okay, so let's say we've got a property. We've managed to achieve 65% GDV. We've put the remaining funds in to be able to fund that 45% up to whatever value is missing. So let's say the total build cost and total purchase price is 75% of the GDV. But we borrowed 65%, so we've put in 10%. That's how that works. We're then ready to move forwards. Now, the difficulty using bridging is that you're going to have a surveyor come out at regular intervals. And it really is a game because you have to make sure that your builder is comfortable with the way that the financing works. So, for example, a lot of builders will want to be paid weekly. So if you haven't got a weekly payment available, you need to make it clear in your tender process and appointment of builders that it's going to be end of month and only when a surveyor comes out to tick things off. The alternative here is to have a float. You could also have a float in your business, which will help to float that business until the invoices come in, the surveyor checks the work and ticks it off with the bridging, and you pay your float. There's a few ways that you can do this, but again, I would speak to somebody with experience and certainly somebody who's done this before embarking on this thing, especially when appointing builders. You've got to be really careful. Okay, let's say it all runs swimmingly. Moving to the second part. The second half of the game is the refinance. So if you're going to stick and hold on a HMO for cash flow purposes, which is one of our core strategies, then it's really, really important that you do a few things correctly. Number one, get the license done for the HMO as soon as possible. The councils can be anywhere between 6 and 12 weeks delay in application for a license to putting a license forward. You're not going to get a mortgage on a HMO if you don't have a HMO license. So you have to do that as soon as possible. As soon as the building regulations are signed off, get that council application in. The second thing is apply early. Apply as early as possible because there's going to be a delay between when you apply for the mortgage and when your surveyor comes out to survey the works. Now, the timing of the surveyor is absolutely crucial. You want, if at all possible, to have tenanted at the rate that you think you should be getting some of the property, if not all of the property, before that surveyor comes. And the reason for that is then you have evidence of the value. If you're going for a commercial yield-based revaluation, that is absolutely crucial because what it will mean is that surveyor has tangible evidence of what the ongoing passing rent is for that property, and he can indicate through the previous research that you did what the existing market rent is in comparable to your passing rent. Hopefully, you can get your surveyor to agree with you. If you don't do those things, then the surveyor's just got a free rein and he has to go away and do his own individual research, and it's not really helpful for them to be able to have to do that. Now, they may ignore that advice. They may just go off their own knowledge. And again, I would also speak to people who've been through this process, if it's your first time, to see which are the better HMO surveyors, because HMO is a specialist product. It's a hybrid between a residential and commercial business. So it's really, really important that you have a surveyor that understands that concept, because the difference in your yield-based valuation, the difference in the market rent or the passing rent that they give to your lender is massive. And if it's low on the rent and high on the yield, your valuation is going to drop considerably. Sometimes it drops like a stone. So I hope that's been helpful. And it's a game of two halves. You have to play both finance games and have to time them really, really well. It's a really, really important part because it's so expensive. It's a big part of your development costs. Circa 15%. You might get a monthly rate, but it's the fees, it's the legal fees, it's all the time that you're going to spend, and then the remortgaging again, the legal fees, mortgaging, all of those types of things, around 15% plus of your total development value to use that finance. Anyway, I hope that's been really, really helpful. And the next episode, we're going to be talking about appointing builders. We're going to be talking about Ready, Steady, Go, which is how to prepare a tender document, how to actually issue it, and how to then go through the tender to make sure that you're apple for apple in your tender evaluation to appoint the right builder, not the cheapest, which is really important. So we'll see you then, and until then, you take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.